When people first see Celestial Return, one of the most common comparisons we get is to Disco Elysium and Citizen Sleeper. And honestly, that makes sense. As we also wrote on our Kickstarter page, these are the games that taught us how this kind of work can be done. If we've never played them, Celestial Return would probably have become a very different game. Disco Elysium, to me, is the best game ever made, not just within narrative RPGs, but in the history of games as a whole. I reference it so often in the university classes I teach that, at this point, my students and I could probably start a disco cult. It is a remarkable work to study, and just as remarkable to return to as a developer. The idea of looting thoughts from people is such a wild and brilliant concept that I still keep coming back to it. Citizen Sleeper is another game I deeply admire, for a different reason. I think it is one of the strongest examples of game design and narrative working together so naturally that they become inseparable. Its systems do not just support the story, they are the story. That was one of the most important things we took from it. We wanted the systems in Celestial Return to contribute to the narrative in an active way. That mattered to us a lot, and I believe we found our method of doing that. Both of those games shaped how people think about narrative RPGs, and for a good reason. But quite early on, I realized that even if Celestial Return exists in conversation with them, the thing we are chasing moves in a slightly different direction. In a strange way, we want to place Blade Runner somewhere between them. Not as a literal blueprint, and not simply as an aesthetic reference, more as a tonal and philosophical presence. Disco Elysium gives you an intensely ideological and fractured relationship within yourself. Citizen Sleeper gives you a beautifully designed struggle for survival within a system. What Blade Runner always gave me was a colder feeling, alienation, emotional distance, a world of vast systems and structures where human beings feel smaller than the things they have built. That feeling became very important for Celestial Return. A big part of the game came from thinking about the fact that people do not struggle under equal conditions. Not everyone enters life, power, or survival from the same starting point. In a city shaped by hierarchy, surveillance, and pressure, success is never just about being clever or capable. It is also about what you have access to, what you can risk, and what kind of compromises you are willing to make before the city breaks you. That idea shaped Howard very strongly. To survive inside this megacity, he cannot move like a traditional heroic character. He sometimes has to play dirty, sometimes he has to be sneaky, sometimes he has to step away from a situation that looks unwinnable. One of the most important things in Celestial Return is understanding that not every encounter is there to be conquered. Walking into the wrong situation with the wrong confidence can cost you far more than it gives back. That is where the dice system became meaningful to us. In Celestial Return, luck is limited. Dice are not an infinite resource. You do not have enough of them to dominate every encounter, force every outcome, or solve every problem head on. That changes how the player thinks. It asks you to pay attention, to prepare, to explore, and to treat the city itself as part of the challenge. Even though the game has a main quest, we never wanted the player to think of the main quest as the only thing that matters. In a way, we wanted the whole city to feel like part of the main quest. If the player does not investigate, wander, search, and gather what they need from the world, they may arrive at crucial moments without the dice they need to reach stronger outcomes. So progression is also about knowing when to look around, when to prepare, and when not to waste your luck. Another thing that shaped Celestial Return was the way we approached branching. In some ways, the game feels closer to a tabletop campaign with a strong DM hand behind it. The story branches, situations can be approached through different methods, and the player has room to solve problems in their own way. Your choices matter, and the way you respond to the world matters. At the same time, there is still an authorial structure holding the shape of the journey together. Anyone who has played tabletop RPGs know that feeling. Sometimes the player pushes the story in unexpected directions. Sometimes the DM quietly guides them back toward the road the story needs to take. Not to erase the meaning of choice, but to keep the overall movement intact. The idea was important to us. So while the player has meaningful choices, and while Howard can face situations through different tones, risk, and methods, there are also moments where the story reasserts itself. In our own language, that force became authority. In our case, Bilge, the invisible hand that sometimes nudges the player back toward the path. I actually like that tension. It feels honest to the kind of game Celestial Return wants to be. A story with a room for expression, but still a story with intention. So if Disco Elysium asks what kind of person you are, and Citizen Sleeper asks how you survive, Celestial Return is more interested in what survival costs you. For us, that cost is not abstract. It lives in caution, compromise, preparation, and the constant awareness that you cannot afford to approach every problem the same way. Sometimes survival means winning. Sometimes it means cheating the odds. Sometimes it means stepping back before the city takes more from you than you can afford to lose. In the end, I think that is where Celestial Return started to feel most honest to me. It came from admiring those games very deeply, learning from them, and then following the question that felt most true to the world we were building.